Hey, it's Don the Auction Professor. Today I wanted to address some of the questions I had, and I had a lot of them, on some of the books and materials you can use to look these up besides eBay. Now, for most items that we sell, eBay is still going to be the best source to look up stuff, but if you need help or some more identification, there are quite a few books, like stamps, for example. Now, I know people talk about the cost of these price guides, new. They can be $400 or $500 for a nice set. This is just one volume of this set, and there's five, I think, for this set here. Now, this is a vintage one. These are Minkus. It's a brand that makes, books and price guides and everything else. There's Scott's, which is the most popular one. If you sell in the United States, Scott's would be the one you would want. And then I've talked about this too. This is Stanley Gibbons. Now, these are British versions too, and they have conversion rates and price rates and things like that inside of these. Again, Stanley Gibbons, and this is what I would recommend if you're from England or something like that and needing to look up prices. They'll all do you the same good. Basically, though, I only use these books for actually IDing the item, and then for pricing, I look online. But there's other places too. You can go to their sites as well, and there's some information. But a lot of the information is based on these price guides, and most of these prices are not what you would get for almost anything in the book. Very few of them are close-wise. I've had some people look in and talk about and ask me questions about the stamps. What's the stamp worth on the back of the postcard? 99% of the time, it's not even worth your time. I don't care what anybody else says. It's so rare that you will ever find a decent stamp on the back of a postcard. You're better off looking at the signatures and the autographs and the notes on the back, because you're going to find more of those that are worth money than you will ever find stamps on the back of postcards. But again, I don't worry if they're new or used books on these, because all you want is the information in them. So don't worry about buying a new set. If you really are gung-ho on getting one of these, you can get a used set for like 10 or 15 bucks at a sale. Of all books, they'll just be a few years old, even 10 or 15, 20 years old. This one's here from the 70s. This one's from like early 80s. It doesn't really matter. You're only wanting the information. And as I've said, the prices in these books mean nothing. They're totally irrelevant, even on the new books. They'll only give you, die-hard, stamp store prices. So if you go into a store, they will probably use the book. They probably won't even charge you at the store, a stamp store, the prices that are actually in this book for most items across the board, because people just don't pay that anymore. It's just a fictitious number as far as I'm concerned. And that goes for most all the price guides or books that I see. It's only worth as much as someone's willing to pay for it. As I said, there is another site. I may show it to you here too, but I don't mess with any of that because it's just not worth my time. And you can look up information on sites, but honestly, the book gives you pictures and tells you everything. It's really quick and easy to tell. It only takes a few moments to find anything in one of these books, as long as you know which book it is. They're alphabetized, so it shouldn't be any issue. Scott's, as I said, is the best one. I'm going to have some links down here as well to pages where you can actually find these items. And I'll probably just have generalized links already set up so you can click and find the specific guide, because there might only be a certain amount of any one of these available, and I would never recommend buying a brand new one of any of these books. It's fine to buy a new one if you're really gung-ho to get it, but for the most part, used ones are just fine. The other thing I had before I go into some more books is what jeweler's loupe I use. Now, I use this one here. This is a vintage Bosch & Lomb from the 40s. It doesn't really matter the brand. I'm just gung-ho on these because I had a whole case of these. I bought a vintage one, and I sell some of these too, but for the most part, I keep all the rest. It has 3 separate magnifications on it. I don't remember if it actually says what the magnifications are. Yeah, 5x to 20x. So one's probably 5, one's 10, and one's 20x. That's how many times it multiplies the actual view. And then there's standard-wise ones. This is a 16x. That's all it does is 16x. And I prefer this one over the brand new one. These are like $6, $8. I will have a link to a couple of them down below. I use them all the time. I carry one of these with me wherever I go. I carry one in my jackets. I have an extra one in my car. So I always have loupes around for many, many things, not just postcards, but for stamps and jewelry and vintage military and across the board. And like military-wise, this is American Military Button Makers and Dealers, their back marks and dates. It's by William McGuinn and Bruce Bazelon. Now, this is a vintage book. You're going to have to find a used copy. It hasn't been in print in a while. But it just has literally the names of what you will find on the back of any button, whether it's military or not. And it'll tell you when the company existed and when they made buttons. There's also in here complete breakdowns of what the back marks look like on Civil War buttons. There's some earlier ones all the way back to War of 1812 and before, but it's just pages of this in the back of it. And these come in very handy because it breaks them all down and you can kind of tell the difference here. So if you're into it, I would recommend this book. I will again have links to all these books down below. If you're interested, they'll be the first links. Any of the links down there, I do get a very small percentage of, for I guess you'd call it a commission, but it's literally pennies. It doesn't pay for really anything, and I haven't even seen a check from anything we've done on YouTube, so don't take that into account. All the books and things I'm recommending obviously are ones that I actually have. I didn't pull them all out because I had to have a stack filling up this table. I have about 150 books in my collection. I counted them, and it's roughly around 150, so, you know, I just pulled out a random stack to show you, like, these price guides. I've got the entire sets. I've got an entire set of Scots. I have 3 different versions of these. I got them in a haul. I have nothing into them, so I kept them. In this way, I cover all bases on all the kinds, because some of them have a little different information in them than other books. But again, this one is key if you're going to do military buttons. Some of the information in here actually crosses over to like buckles and things, because the company made more than just buttons for the most part. So again, another good book. This one here is Christmas 1940 through 1945. It's by Robert Brenner, and it's by Schiffer Books for Collectors. And this one's really nice. It's mostly pictures. The prices are way off, though, so don't pay attention to the prices in them. But it's got even down to photographs, just stuff I've talked about, and Christmas cards, all the kind of stuff I've talked about, all the stuff that you're going to see. Like these pages, I see these all the time. You know, the prices in here say they're worth some money, but honestly, they don't sell very much except in Christmas, and then there's still not a ton of money. But for IDing and knowing what's good and what to buy, this book is key for the new folks that are just starting out. It'll be in one separate reference. I mean, it's literally got everything you can need in it. And, you know, it's a good book. It's interesting. I bought it used for $1, so for $1, you know, it's available online for 20 or 30 bucks. It's probably worth the 20 or 30 bucks as well, too. I'm just cheap, so I haven't spent that on it. That's another good book. I think I've got another Christmas one in here. I'm going to show you all of these, of course, but now here's another one that's pretty good, too. This is Christmas Revisited. It's by the same person, Robert Brenner. I didn't even realize that, actually. But it's the same person. It shows ornaments, and you'll see Victorian ones as well, too. So this one does farther back than his other book. And I don't pay attention to the authors per se. I pay attention to the quantity and the quality of the information in the book. But it's got a ton of information. It goes way back to the Victorian era. And it's just loaded. Light bulbs. It shows you what the ads looked like, where you'd buy them at. I mean, overall, it's a very, very good interest. There's also inside here a book, Santa Claus candy containers. Someone's even stuck a little page thing in here to mark it. But it's a good book. Again, I buy most of these used. I'll, again, put some links down below. It may just be to a link to the general page that this is on, just, again, because some of these you won't find, like, mass quantities of or new ones. So if you're interested in it, and there's other people out there, you know, from this video looking, they're going to go probably quick on some of the ones on there. But these books I honestly do use. You see I have copies of them. I haven't put them up for sale. I don't have any price guides up for sale because I usually don't sell those that way. Usually I ask friends if I get some in if they want them for a couple bucks, and that's usually what I do with most of the extra ones. If I don't have one, I keep it. Another real good one here. Now this one touches on celluloid and kids' toys, Victorian trade cards, and paper dolls and things like that. It's Children's Paper Premiums, the American Advertising. It's 1890 through 1990s. Now this has a ton of stuff. It covers a lot of the vintage areas, puzzles and games and stuff. And all of this stuff is things that would show up on sales. I've seen a large chunk of what's in this at antique malls, at flea markets, estate sales, across the board. I've even shown some of these. This is one right here, just a random item. I showed this in a haul video about 2 weeks ago. War songs. It's a GAR piece. It's advertising. All this stuff will show up. I found probably at least a quarter of what's in this book. Here's some paper dolls from the Victorian era. I've had all of these paper dolls, puzzles from the Victorian era, spool cotton items. I mean, this book is really neat. Again, it's Children's Paper Premiums, the American Advertising, 1890 to 1990s. It's by Loretta Metzger Rieger and Legretta Metzger Bejerick. I'm sure I've pronounced that a little wrong, but again, another good book. It's just got some really nice stuff in it. You know, if you like looking at stuff, this is a real good book to get. It's going to give you some ideas on a lot of the paper. and maybe even give you some better ideas on where to find this stuff, because these talk about other areas and other aspects on it too. Like this one, for example, the stuff that's in this one aren't just considered trade cards. They have cross-category interests. So that means that they may be Victorian trade cards, but like doll collectors will buy the paper dolls. They'll list them in the paper doll section, not just Victorian, or not even just the paper section. I mean, even the back cover shows the paper dolls that I actually have. And I've got hundreds of Victorian paper dolls now. And as I said, you got to think outside the box. You're going to find even trade cards at doll collector shows, because some of the actual trade cards are paper dolls. And they don't necessarily know the prices on them. You know, don't just go for something like that, because some of these places you would have to pay to get into. But dolls do sell too. I don't usually buy much dolls at it, but if you see a doll advertisement for a doll collector at one of these shows, or at a estate sale or an auction, it might be worth going just because of that. And I've shown paper dolls across the board in videos, at least the 3 or 4 videos I have on hauls that I've showed paper dolls. I've shown some that have sold in my What Sold videos as well too. So that's just another thing you want to think about. Now here's another one, the Encyclopedia of Antique Postcards, and I've talked about this one before. Susan Brown Nicholson. Now this is a real good one here. Now this is mostly for the artists that are on them. Again, most of the prices on these are dead. They don't relate to what they actually sell for. And again, there's another site that just sells postcards. When we're done showing you these few books here, I'm going to go to the screen and show you some more that I own. Again, I wasn't going to pull out a huge stack of books. I just grabbed a stack just to show you the gist of it. But we will talk about some other ones as well too. So again, this is a good one here. It shows a lot of the series that are well known. It's got the name Outcult. Now that's another one, Buster Brown artist. You know, and it has most of the stuff that I've talked about in here across the board. So again, just keep that in mind. There's a ton of various manufacturers, and then we get again across category items. If you look here, there's postcard paper dolls. So these all cross in. There's 3 or 4 books that could all cover the same item in those books. The Christmas ones have some of the Christmas paper dolls in them. The children's paper premiums have paper dolls in them. Postcard book has paper dolls in them. There's a Victorian trade card book just like this by David Childs, I believe is his name. I know the gentleman somewhat. We've talked numerous times online. He also has paper dolls in them too. So again, cross-category items are always better than specific niches, only because you can sell them to many people. Like a paper doll from a Victorian item can be considered many different things. It can be from a postcard even. So it could be a postcard, a trade card, a premium, and a Christmas item. So just keep that in mind. Another one is record price guides. Now, I don't usually use record price guides. I have most of them. There's a Goldmine, which is one that's big. They have it specifically broken down, so you have to buy several books. They're expensive. I'll have links to those as well. There's Osborne's, which is another price guide. It's a combined one which has many different size records and some aspects of it, but it doesn't cover everything. There's one just on 78s, again, but I use PopPsych, Discogs, and eBay to price everything, you know, for record-wise. But this one's not bad. The good thing about this one here is it's got just the labels on it. So if you're not sure on the labels, this is why I picked this one out over Goldmine. Some of those show them too, but this has an exceptionally good multiple-page breakdown across the board on each label, and then it has a date on the label. If there's a reproduction, it usually shows you all of those labels on it. So this alone is good for that aspect of it. There's quite a few pages you can see. It goes on for quite a while. It gives you a real good idea on the labels. This one's key for a lot of folks that are new to this. So again, I'm going to have links to all of these. I don't know what this book costs new. This is an earlier copy. And again, I just use it for reference material only, not prices on any of these. And now here's another one. This isn't a thick one. It's Collector's Guide. This is Volume 2. This only covers 1925 through 1970 because that is the key era that you will want these. Now I have the earlier version, Volume 1 and Volume 3, but this one is the one you'd really want. It covers movie posters and lobby cards. And it's just a wealth of pictures. It gives you an idea. You should be able to tell if it's an original or not based on it. It lists all the high dollar top of the line ones, or at least shows some in here. It talks about the information for deciding what's what. It shows a lot of other information on here. So again, it's not a huge book. It's got a lot of information though. If you like the artwork alone, this is well worth it just for the artwork. So again, this is by I don't even remember who this is by. Robert Brosh. So again, this isn't a bad one either. This is strictly horror, science fiction, fantasy on these, because these are the key ones. There's other ones, obviously, like Casablanca or something like that. But this is the one that I like the best. This one here. I'll probably include some links to some of the other ones. And then if you're not up on dolls, what you're going to find the most of are 1960s and 1970s dolls that sell the best. They're easier to find than most of the other ones. This touches on Barbies as well, which came out in the 50s. This is Collector's Guide to Dolls of the 1960s and 70s, Volume 2. It's by Cindy Sabulous. But this has most of the ones that you will find in it. You know, now, I've seen the other ones. I've got copies of most of the other ones. I don't have a specific just on Barbies. They do make them. I'm not centered in on anything specific. I can pretty much tell you if it's a good one just by looking at the marks on Barbie's derriere, because that's usually where they mark what version. It'll have a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4, and that's usually the actual model version. Plus, you have to compare patent pending and the dates on them. But for the most part, it lists most of the dolls that you're going to run into at these sales. There's some that are newer than this that are worth some money too, but for the most part, this is the key area I center in on. If it's earlier, usually I can tell. Dolls are a hectic market. They're swooped up really quickly. So again, these are the kind you want, and it lists the common average ones that you will see. Not super high priced ones across the board, but they're good profit margins nonetheless. So literally, these few books here are real good help, and I'm going to show you some more here in just a second. But it's just the basics on these, you know. Don't sink a lot of money into these. You can get them from the library too. If you're not worried on the funds, you know, again, go to the links below and then purchase a couple of the ones. Obviously, this is key if you're in postcards, just to ID who the artists are, because you cannot always read the signatures on there. And once you've read the articles, it goes into an explanation on them, as well as the trade card book, the Victorian trade card book that I'll link in here as well too. These are basic books, you know. Some of these you can get from the library, some of them you can't. And as I've said before, you can reserve a lot of books from your local library that are in other areas of the state. In most libraries, they have like here in Ohio, we have an Ohio link, Ohio search, where you can actually search from anywhere. It doesn't take anything. If you're unsure how to do it, go to your library, go to the information desk and ask them. But we're going to go over to the screen and I'm going to show you a few more books. So again, I haven't pulled out all my books. I would have to pull out over 150 books on average to show you some of the books that we do possess. I've literally got a full bookshelf in my eBay area that's just books on stuff like this. I do have some behind me that when I'm sitting down here that I do pull out occasionally, but they're mostly like stamps or small kind of items. I'm just going to give you some of the key ones again that I use. Now, I have Albert's book. I've had this for a long time. It's from '97. It's out of print as far as I know. And it was actually published originally in like the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 1977. Now, this is the definitive book on it. This is the cheapest or best result. I'll just put some links, as I said, down below this video here so you can see. But this is the button book that I personally use and own. You can get it, oh geez, probably around 40 or so bucks or less, depending on, you know, the day of the week or what site you go to. But it's Record of American Uniform and Historical Buttons. It's by Alpheus H. Albert. It's Albert's book. I don't pay much attention to his first name, but it's Albert's. Or Albert is his name. It's just Albert's book. But anyway, we'll go on to the next one. Now, this is the one everybody talks about. This is a newer one. I guess he's in the know and in the hip with everybody who's everybody on buttons. I've seen his books, you know. I've never went out and bought them just because of the price, and I already have Albert's. Most of what I need to know is in there, or I've already figured it out on my own. If you're starting off, Albert's would be the book to get, but if you see buttons and have tons of sources for buttons, Tice's may be a little better for you. He goes into different aspects, too, and has several different books. I believe this is a lot of all of the books included all together, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I'm not going to go down and dig through them. This is basically just U.S. though, of course, too. So you're going to have to dig around to get some of the other ones. There are books, and it's like a 4 or 5 volume set for like uniforms of transportation and things along that line. That set I've had before. Even used, you're going to sink close to say $400 into all 5 volumes now. So I'm not going to even talk about that one now. I've had them. I've actually sold them wise because I just wasn't using them enough, even with me finding a bunch of them. Because after a while, there's only a few that you even need to look up, and it's not worth me sitting on the $400 worth of books to look up 1 or 2 buttons a year. I'll just toss them out there because I'm usually pretty familiar with the basic design and can tell at least what type of button it is, whether it's a like steamship line or a railroad line or something along that line, or even a fraternal. So anyway, I wouldn't recommend this one. It's out there. Get it from the library and look at this book to see. Albert's is at the library, but if you're going to do anything on military buttons at all, that's the book to get. It's got everyone in there, all the way up to modern day. It doesn't have all the varieties and oddball, one-of-a-kind casts that were dug up on battlefields and things, but that's not really what you're looking for because you're not going to run into those for the most part at all anyway. I never do, and I hit, places that have this stuff. I almost never run into a really high dollar, $4,000 or $5,000 button anywhere. And then if I did, usually I'd know that it's worth that much anyway, just by the maker on the back or, the button face itself. But again, you've already seen the maker, the backmark book. That one I would recommend even if you're not, way up on buttons. If you get a bunch of them or, you want to know, that's going to tell you the age no matter what, because the button marks on the back matter more than anything else. Most of the buttons from the Civil War, the ones that are worth a lot of money, they've recast them over and over again, or companies have taken the faces, the original die stamps for the faces. And even if you look on eBay, you can actually find original die stamps for various buttons to actually make your own at home if you had the equipment. So, I mean, these things are still around there even now. Even from buttons from the 1820s and 30s, I've seen die stampers from on eBay for $20 and $30. But again, you need the whole equipment. It's usually just one side. So factories can still repress some of these, and they'll look identical to the Civil War face-wise because it's the same stamping, or something along that line. And there was a company called Bannerman's. So now I have a vintage catalog from Bannerman's from like 1910. They bought out all the leftover Civil War stuff sitting in warehouses and actually bought out the die stampers for these, and then they made their own. So there's a lot of reproduction Civil War across the board, even Spanish-American War and the whole works. There's a lot of reproductions. Mills buckles, that's like one of the most common reproduced buckles I have ever seen military-wise, and you'll see them all over the place. Unless you know the difference, you're going to be stung every time. I only buy the ones I'm sure on, and I've probably passed on 1 or 2 that might have been good, but if I wasn't sure, I'm not going to sink $100 into a Mills buckle. A Mills buckle is a specific type of buckle. It's usually worn around the Spanish-American War era all the way up to like World War I. It's a specific kind. It's almost like an H shape on the face of it. It's a wider belt itself, too. You want to know what a Mills buckle is, look it up on a comp on eBay. And you'll see the varied range on them, and you're going to see a ton of fake ones out there, too. Again, if you want to learn something new, type in Mills buckle. You don't have to do that, but, that's how I learn stuff. I look it up and see what I can find on stuff. Just random stuff all the time. I'm always learning a new category the best I can. Now, silver markings, I'm going to show you 2 of the very popular books. I actually own these books. I don't use them, and I'm going to show you why in just a minute here. Now, if you're out somewhere and you don't have access online or something, or you don't have the quickest, service, Jackson's Hallmarks. It's a pretty good book. The only problem with it is it only is basically European and only specifically English, Scotland, and Ireland marks. Those are usually what you're going to see the most of, honestly. There's very rare occasions that I run into maybe a Russian mark or something like that, or knowing that 80 on a jewelry piece is actually Russian gold or something along that line. You've got to know some of the basic marks. A lot of people aren't aware that, foreign gold is not marked the same way it is marked over here. You're not going to see stuff like that. Like gold filled over here might be marked 8 carat in England, because that's about the gist of what, the majority of decent gold filled is. It's about 8 carat. It means that there's so much gold filled in with regular stuff as well, too. But Jackson's Hallmark book guide is pretty good. The pocket edition is the one I would recommend getting. You can get them for $3 or $4. And it's really going to be a good tool for you if you're out and you see a lot of this. Now, back in the day, years ago, I never thought much about it. I've always liked silver, so I've bought silver pieces for 10, 20 years. And I've had various Hallmark books, too, because we've run into them. I brought stuff back and actually got stopped at the airport once when we were bringing back from Boston a ton of silver jewelry wrapped up in a lunchbox that I bought. I bought a Tom Corbett lunchbox. It was in our suitcase. And literally, I spent like 35 minutes, and this was before 9/11, sitting at the airport, security checkout, because there was some, sterling silver knives and things in there too. But anyway, it was not an issue at the end of the day. I just had to pull out a lot of stuff, including, underwear and personal belongings, which was just awful. But anyway, no big deal. But this one I would recommend. There's another one here that I would recommend. Most of the Schiffer books are really good. They're well illustrated. They really go above and beyond from my personal opinion. And I've bought many of the Schiffer brand, or whatever the case may be. The publisher, I think, is Schiffer. This is Dorothy Rainwater, Encyclopedia of American Silver Manufacturers. Now, this goes into detail about them, too, but it lists most of the major markings. Now, I found some in the past that have been rare. I found a Paul Revere silversmith piece, and then I found a piece, actually, this was in Boston, though, and then I found a piece of silver, coin silver that was actually smithed by someone who studied under him when he was early on in his career. So if you're not aware, Paul Revere was a silversmith. I believe his father was too. I revere, you'll see some of these markings on the pieces. It's not odd. It may be odd for some folks to not realize this, but there's thousands of pieces of this stuff out there. Not just him, but pieces attributed to Revere because of, people who trained under him or trained under the same person he trained under. So you're going to see stuff like that too. Like knowing what a coffin backed handle on a spoon is. It's a coffin shape. There's a lot of things that help age silver. I do buy a lot of silver. I've shown, scant pieces, but I do get a lot of it, without actually showing you real super close-ups on the hallmarks. And even if I do show you the hallmarks, chances of you finding the exact piece that I have is very slim. So, you have to know something about the basics of it. You have to kind of know the sound and the feel if it's not marked in something you would know. There's always a drop test. I can usually tell by the ring of an item if I drop it on a table. Obviously, coins are real easy to tell if you've heard the noise and can tell, like drop a silver $50 and then drop a 40%, like in 1966 through 70, 40% $50, and you'll tell the difference there. And then drop like a 1976 bicentennial $50 or something along that line, and you're going to be able to tell the difference on those. And once you can tell the difference, you can usually tell the difference on silver from foreign countries, because I find more silver from foreign countries than I ever find silver from the U.S., especially if it's been cleaned. But anyway, let's move on here. This is a good book. But the reason I wouldn't recommend buying books is because of this site here. This is 925-1000.com, and it's an index, and it searches. I've used this site over and over and over and over again. It splits them up into date marks to mint marks to, styles, even newer, and it breaks them all down. This site I have on a favorite place. I have this site on my phone. It's really going to break it down. This is one that I've used for a long time. You can separate it if you're looking at, modernist, which is usually the ones that you're going to find. It's going to have actually wording on the back versus hallmarks. Some have hallmarks. Let me see if we can go to, that's Gorham. Let's go by some of the date marks. This is like a specific company, and this company has been around since about the War of 1812, and this will help you identify them, because sometimes you'll just see, like S&K or something like that. But there's tons of different hallmarks for everything across the board, like Whiting and Davis, like Tiffany, like Tuttle. Now, Tuttle has some early ones, too. You just have to know a little bit about these two and be able to identify the touch marks and things like that. There's so many different marks out here. Touch marks are the ones I'm more familiar with, like the hallmarks, the heads, and things like that, as I found many of these pieces. Like the bird here on the Austria one. they're pretty easy to miss if you don't know that that's a silver mark. This is the silver mark. That is it. It doesn't say sterling. It doesn't say anything. So I always look through huge bunches of silver, even if they say it's silver plate, because so many people miss this. And I find silver at antique malls. My best find was a 2-pound lidded oval dish. It was 2 literally pounds of sterling silver that was marked in a very odd, I guess you'd say, location. And sometimes they're marked on like the brim or the edge. Sometimes they're marked on the lid, underneath the handle, inside the handle. I mean, there's so many odd places that these are marked. Some of them, they're so worn that people don't realize that's what it is, or they only think it's going to say sterling or 925, and when it doesn't say that, they don't worry about it. So I do find silver all the time, and I've shown some. I have a big, well, I wouldn't say bucket full, but I've got, half a bucket full of just silver pieces. I've probably got about 8 pounds of sterling at any given time, or have had, I should say. I don't think I have that much now, but I'll be actually changing it in here in the next week or so. And then you get a check usually when you turn this in, just in case there's anything stolen or anything like that. I've never had any issues with anything because I buy it usually legit from somebody with a receipt. There is occasions, that I buy something in a garage sale that I can't actually produce a receipt. I usually bring a pad with me and see if they'd sign it if I'm doing that way. Rule of thumb is you want some sort of receipt, not just something written in a book. And if you bring a little receipt book that can fit in your pocket, there are, notebook-sized ones that you can carry, and that's what I actually have. And that way you can even have duplicates if that's the case, and you can give them one or whatever the case may be. Chances are the people running the garage sales aren't ever going to report it. So anyway, let's move on here. Next book here. Now, people talk about buttons. I've sold tons of buttons. I have, thousands of them in inventory right this minute. This book here is pretty good. If you don't know anything about buttons, it's the Big Book of Buttons. It's like 800-900 pages or something like that. It's a huge book, but it costs a fortune. I would get it from the library. I would never recommend buying the book. If you get it cheap somewhere, $5 or $10, you're going to make some money selling it after you're done with it too, even $50. I've spent $50 or $60 on this book on a couple occasions and then turned around and sold it. It's a quick, easy money. You can sell this on Amazon, FBA, and still make a real good profit still to this day. So anyway, let's move on here. I got another one here. Now, I have this one. This is one I bought, around 2000 probably when we were just looking into it. It's not a super good book for, huge amounts of quantity, but it's got a lot of content for what it is. And the Button Societies all recommend this one. And if you go to a button show, they're going to have this button book out there as well as the Big Book of Buttons. And this one's fairly cheap. This is a primer. This is probably the basics. It'll give you all the descriptions and the types of buttons and such forth too. So anyway, and again, I'm going to have, links down below. And this is by Peggy Ann Osborne. Gold Mine. Now, Gold Mine, I don't care who it's by. I never really much pay attention to the actual author. I just look at Gold Mine on the book, as long as it's a legit one. And again, I don't use the books themselves for prices at all. Now, I have most of these books. I have this one as well. I just use them for dates and things like that, because sometimes on some sites, date is important. You want to make sure you have the right version of it. So, like, let's say you're listing on Discogs or something. You want to tie it to a listing that's, the correct date. So you're not going to be, have negative feedback for listing a incorrect edition, because some records, it's hard to tell what edition it is. The matrix numbers on them are usually pretty easy to tell which one's which, and the matrix numbers are the hand-etched or machine-stamped oddball numbers and letters that are in the dead wax between the last groove and the center hole of the center of the record. Now, some records, there's some on the very outside of it, very few, and sometimes, like on some of the early Led Zeppelins, they'll say things on it. Some people write statements and write lyrics and lines on there. There's one on, I think, Led Zeppelin 1 that has duck in the title. I can't remember exactly what it says, but I always look for it, and usually, if I find it, I know to, hey, put a little better price on it. But there's varieties on records, just like there is on, buttons and stamps and everything else that we personally sell. Postcards is about the only area that's not going to have a bunch of varieties on the same card. There might be different, styles or images of that same building or place or whatever in different cards, but they're all different. They're even made by different people, so... And Goldmine has His name is Dave Thomas, just in case you're curious. But again, I don't pay attention to who wrote it. Goldmine 45 Records. 45s will sell better than LPs now, just across the board. LPs are being repressed all the time, especially the Japanese, and they actually have like weights listed in the title because there are so many grams or grains of vinyl to make them. So it's basically a condition of quality or a statement of quality. How much grams of vinyl is in the record, I guess. How thick it is. It's not cheap and one of the flexi style discs or anything like that. So anyway, for a price, if you're interested in $20, it's probably worth it, I would say. And that's a new copy too. It's at Amazon. A lot of the links I'll have are from Amazon. Some of the links, I'm going to get a small commission on if you buy them. Again, I don't really care. It's pennies. I haven't seen a dime from them in the first place yet either. At some point maybe I'll earn enough to get a check or something. But again, I'm not worried about that. These are books that I personally own and personally used, or that I have used and have owned and since gotten rid of. But I usually use online pricing. PopPsych is the best for prices. It doesn't give you all the rest of the information. So, Goldmine will be beneficial to you if you're new and don't understand categories and genre and, ages and stuff like that. I've shown you a couple other ones too. The labels are like a key thing that you need to know. You need to be able to tell an old label from a repress. Now, they repress a lot of the expensive 45s nowadays, so you need to know what the difference is on the dead wax because, one version is actually hand-etched and the other version is actually stamped. So you might have a repro showing a stamped matrix and then the original is a hand-engraved. So you need to know that kind of stuff to know that you're not going to get stunk. So let's say you get out somewhere and you see a record that books for 1,000 and they want 150 on it. You better darn well know that it's the right version of the record and it's not a repress. There are some very good represses out there that I have a hard time telling. Some are easier to tell than others. Some of the originals are on styrene and not on vinyl. Sci Hightower has a couple like that, but there's some labels that are literally on styrene, and if you find them on vinyl, it's a fake. Some pressed them on vinyl and styrene, and they only faked the vinyl ones because they figured people could tell the difference between styrene. Most people can't, though, so anyway, most novice anyway, I can tell the difference because I've had a ton of them. Usually by looking at the edge of the record, you can tell those, but anyway. Now, I'll just give you one more. Les Docs. Now, this is an older one. Prices aren't great. He doesn't list very many records. It's only 30,000. Don't mess with this, even if people recommend it. It's good for IDing, maybe, if you get it for $1 or $2, but I wouldn't recommend this at all. You can see just by the book value here, and even the markings on, his rating points aren't great on this one here, but no criticism on the guy whatsoever, because he's got some information, but other people are the better source for this, in my opinion. If you're going to buy an older book and use it for, reference, Osborne's is probably the better one to get, because it's got a huge amount. It's got like 1 million, values for more than 1 million records instead of just 30,000 on Doc's version. Osborne, I have a couple different versions of this book. I think I got the one before this, which came out a couple years before, maybe 2004, 2003 or something. But Osborne's got the book out there. And again, prices are not going to mean much at all. Some of them will still be close, depending on if they're still popular or not. At least it'll give you an idea on which ones are valuable. Just don't get excited if you get the book and you see stuff that say $1,000, because there's Bo Horn has a record in the book that's listed as like $1,000, and that record's only worth like 10. So he's left out facts. There's some misconceptions. There's some misstatements in there. It's not a ton of them, but I do pay attention to the book. I've got highlights to the entire book, and it's a pretty thick book, just for future. And then I found PopPsych, and then I pretty much put the book away. But if you're new, it's a good read, for looking through stuff or keeping in the car if you don't have phone access or phone ability. Oh, here's the other one that I have too. I've got this one as well. And I use the two to compare. I think it's 2004, if I'm not mistaken, on this one. 2004. As I said, I've got them both, and I compared, his corrections and stuff like that, just for my own personal reference. I'm big into records, if you haven't figured that out. I've got a couple 100,000 right now. But, when you know that, you've seen that many records. I've seen millions. I've seen in my hands millions of records. You kind of get the gist on it, and you I guess I buy some of these just for comparisons, I guess, more than anything else, see if they caught the errors and things. But anyway, let's move on.
Military collectibles. And I'm just going to pop this one down on the bottom. I'm not going to go into big detail on it. This is a overall price guide for various sundries in military. It's an older one, but it's got a lot of good pictures and content, so it's not a bad one. Richard Austin. Again, I'm going to have links down below for all these. Let's see here. Another World War, Warmans. Now, Warmans is a good one. This one's not too bad at all either. But this is just World War II items. Let's see here. Now, Star Wars I've talked about. My price guide is dated. This is more a price guide as opposed to a reference. Now, there's reference guides out there too. The ones that I like and the one that I have, I'm not going to show you because it's outrageous price-wise. It's been long out of print. But it has like licensees. It's got every licensee that Lucasfilms did, so you can kind of see what's what and know for sure if it's a legit item, because there's a lot of forgeries too, believe it or not. But this is Beckett's Star Wars Collectibles, 2017. They've made a bunch of them. I'm not a huge fan of Beckett's overall, but the book's okay. Now, this one here I would recommend if you're not up on Marx Toys. This is Marx Toy Sampler. It's a history of Marx as well, and it's a price guide. It's an older one, but it'll give you an idea on what's what. So once you know what's what, then you can go look them up on eBay. And this one's not huge priced. It's like 20 or 30 bucks for a decent copy. New-wise are outrageous. I wouldn't buy any of these new. And then there's other versions. There's ones that just cover robots and space toys. There's other ones that are in fact, I think I have them up here. Hang on, let's move on to the next one here. No, another Star Wars. I'm sorry, I've got them a little out of order. Overstreets has a overall Star Wars guide, like stuff like this. I have that poster, mind you, and it's a fairly expensive poster. I got it when it first came out, before the movie came out, because I was a huge Star Wars fan, and I got to be friends with a movie guy who actually ran a theater, and he held the poster for me. I spent some money on it. I've got a couple Revenge of the Jedi, including The Empire Strikes Back advanced re-release, and the advanced re-release has coming soon. I think it advertises the first preview for Revenge of the Jedi in the movie, and not only that, but I actually have 70mm Dolby film that was removed from that copy that actually has the title, and it says Revenge of the Jedi. I've been offered some money for those, but I haven't decided to do anything with them. I've kept some key items for collectibles. We've got a couple bank boxes that we keep stuff into. So anyway, let's move on here. Toy Soldiers. This is a pretty good one. This covers overall aspect. This is a bad photo of it, but it's not a bad book. It's a cheap book. $6-7. It'll at least give you a idea on it. In fact, there's more of them here. I'll probably give you like a generalized page, so you can just go from there for a link. Let's see. The Confident Collector. Now, this is Toy Identification or Toy Soldiers. This one's not bad. It's another dated version, but it'll give you a good overall. So if you want to just think a couple bucks into it and give you an overall idea, that way you can ID them by the book, and then you'll know exactly what to type in for a comp search. Usually people tell me they can't figure out what to do for a comp search. But let's go back here for just 1 second. Now, Marx has Greenberg's is another guide, and I don't have most of the Marx because I know basically overall what to look for. In most everything that says Marx is marked, and then I would just go by eBay or online Google searches to figure out the prices of them. That's all I do for these, but I do know what to look for. So if you don't, take some of these out from the library. Most of these you can find somewhere. You may have to go down to the library, and then you can just Xerox or take some photos of the pages you're interested in. But anyway, let me go back to where we were. Again, this one here is Bertel Brunn. Let's see here now. This is Opie's Pocket Guide to Britain's Hollow-Cast Toy Soldiers. Now, Britain's is a brand. Opie's Guide is pretty good. I've had it. I don't keep it because I just don't run into Britain's soldiers anymore, and I know what they are. I don't really care if I know the value on them overall because I'm not going to buy them unless they're really cheap. And then if they're expensive, I'm going to look them up, whether the person likes it or not. If it's not worth it, I just won't buy it. But if you don't know and you run into a ton of lead and pewter soldiers, that is the best one. And if you don't know, all those vintage lead and pewter soldiers, you should be very careful with. Wear gloves if you have to, if you're handling tons of them, and always wash your hands afterwards because there is lead in the pewter, or obviously if it's lead soldiers, there's going to be lead across the board, and it's not healthy for you, so just keep that in mind. Now, Tomarts. Tomarts I do recommend across the board. They are pretty darn good. It's one of the better ones. Now, Tomarts has action figure collectible guides. Now, you might get lucky and see these on eBay, and be able to get volumes 1 through 3 for maybe 15 or 20 bucks on a good day. Usually they go for more than that, 25 or so, but they are worth getting. If you see a ton of old toys and you don't know what to look up or how to look it up, Tomarts is really good. It covers most every series that I can think of. There's some that are left out, some of the high dollar and oddball ones. But if it's not in the guide, then you can assume that it's probably pretty scarce and it probably carries a value anyway. But this is volume 2. And again, it goes by type of figure. So this covers G.I. Joe through Star Trek. This is volume 1, A-Team through G.I. Joe. And then there's one more volume which covers Star Wars through Zybots, which are, robots from a TV series. There's a ton of them to get. This overlaps some of the Star Wars ones, but there's so many other things in this category of action figures that are worth a ton of money. And you can see even on the cover, there's a few that I've actually talked about. There's only so many lines of these available. Once you've been through the books and you've locked in the knowledge, you can always go ahead and just sell the books, Tomarts encyclopedias and price guides still sell. I don't remember if there's a newer version of this or not, but this is the one that you will need. It doesn't matter if it happened after 96. I don't mess with too many more figures or anything from post 96 unless I'm buying them in huge bulk and I'm not paying much for them anyway. I mean, there's some good figures still out past that, but I just usually, if they're cheap, I buy them, and if not, I don't worry about them. Your call on that one. If I see a whole bunch of WrestleMania figures or something, I don't care what age they are, and they're cheap, I'm going to buy them because I'm going to at least be able to flip those for a real good profit. But Tomarts is a good guide, so all three of them are good. Each one covers a certain segment of the action figures, and they go from there. Bill Sikora is the author. I don't know if he's the same one. It's the same one on all of them. I figured that's usually how those work. But let's move on to a couple other ones here. And there's one just on wrestling figures, too. And it covers, pretty much the whole gambit, the almost 40 years of figures. And it covers Jake's, which is one of the ones I always look for. And then LJN. Those are like the two ones that I get. And those are the vintage ones. Remco, like in there, too. Those are all like 80s. And those are usually the best ones to get. Like a nice Andre the Giant or something like that. Or JYD or any of them. Those are pretty good. But anyway. And here's another, Warman's. Now, Warman's isn't bad either. This is an overall guide. It doesn't have as many images and information, but it's pocket-sized. It's a field guide. And either ones that say field guide are usually better just because you can put it in your pocket. But again, if you're sitting at the house and you want something, more visible and more visual that's going to be more identifiable and more helpful, I would get the Tomarts version, just my personal opinion. It's really going to be your opinion on that, so, that's up to you. You can check them out at the library first before you decide, but I'll keep the links down here, so at any point you want to come back and decide you want to get them, just go ahead and click on the link and it'll take you right to one of them. Now, there's another one just on Marx action figures. Now, this isn't going to include the Army Men. You need to get one of the Toy Soldier books. I believe the main Marx book does include most of them, but it doesn't go into all the varieties. There's a ton of varieties on Toy Soldiers, like little Army Men from Marx. But this is into like the Johnny West line and things like that. Because they made Johnny West. They made like a knockoff of G.I. Joe and stuff like that. So you're going to see other ones. I can't say that it's worth your time on this one here because the other books kind of cover it. This goes into more detail and prices all kinds of stuff from those lines. But anyway, let's move on here. Now, this one I would recommend, Warman's costume jewelry. There's other ones too, don't get me wrong. For a new person starting off, this is pretty decent. This has a ton of nice costume jewelry in it. It's by Pamela Y. Wiggins, and this is a newer one, 2014. Now, a lot of these guides, you're going to see that they're not modern and up to date because they only make them so often because of the time that it takes to make a book either way. And you don't want to have one come out every year because no one's going to buy them that often. It's just not practical. Most people, just use them for identification and then look up the prices on eBay or whatever site they're using. There's sites for jewelry and stuff. Just like I said, there's sites just for stamps. There's sites just that sell postcards too as well. And I think I'll go over those in some videos here soon too as well, just for FYI sake. Now, this one here, I would recommend anybody who messes with costume jewelry at all. Now, I have a copy of this book. David McClellan is the last name. This is literally again, I don't pay much attention to the authors. I know the book by heart. But this shows you how to clean, and just as it says, repair and restore your jewelry. Now, I do fix up jewelry sometimes. I will put fixed and repaired in most every listing that I do. Once in a blue moon, I may have forgotten or slipped up, but I always try to do it. There was never an intention to mislead anybody on this stuff. And if you write that it's been repaired and it's just been something re-glued, just put that in there. But if you have repaired it, like just say you glued a stone on or something, 9 out of 10 people aren't going to care at all. Just because they would get it, if they liked it and it happened while they had it, they would end up gluing it anyway. It's safer to buy a piece that's been re-glued to some extent, because then you're not going to lose the stone if it is loose or something. So anyway, I would recommend this book, Jewelry Fix-Ups. It's really good. It goes into good detail. It's for not just, vintage, but it's an overall how to fix and repair jewelry. It's got stuff on stringing and remounting and mounting stones and replacing stones. Now I have jeweler's tools, so I've got prong set, pliers and things like that, just because I have done so much of it. Maybe you haven't seen. I'll have to get a video together. I've shot one in the past, but the sound came out awful, and I've reshot part of it. I just haven't put it back together yet, but we've got hundreds of pieces up now, and I've got probably about 30 pounds of actual individually picked out pieces of costume jewelry to list. They'll go up for Christmas. I mean, they're in the process right now, but costume jewelry sells a lot, and I sell more during holidays than I do any other time of the year, so this is a good time of year to do that. Now, this one's here, if you're really into postcards, and I showed you the better book with photos that goes into good detail. This one here is just, this is Mashburn's book. This is just on artist-signed postcards, and it gives the prices for them, too. He's got a couple editions. I think there might even be a newer, maybe even 2 newer ones on this. But any basic book's going to cover who the artist is. So sometimes it's very hard to tell who the artist was, and you might not even think about it because you can't read the signature. So this book is what will help you with that. So, yeah, I'm not going to recommend it to those of you if you're not fully into postcards. Just get one of the standard postcard books, and don't worry about this. Who knows? You half the time you can tell what they are, or at least be able to figure it out. So, again, some people, I have a copy of this. I haven't used it in years. I probably would sell it at some point just because I don't use it. Just because after a while, these postcards, they didn't make them after the 20s for the most part, the artist signed ones, at least the good ones. And, there's only a limited number of artists out there. There's, 100 or so maybe. Once you've seen them all a couple dozen times, it's, you know who they are. You can tell the signature right off the bat, even if most normal people can't read it. It's just the way it is. And in this one here, now I have this one just for the artwork's sake. Fantasy postcards. It's got prices, but again, the prices aren't relevant. But the book itself, if you want to see some real nice postcards, this is a good book. It's by Mashburn as well, too. And I think he's got a couple other books along the same line. A lot of people put out price guides, not because necessarily maybe he's into it or not. I don't really remember the story. I probably read it at some point, but they get money out of producing references and stuff like that. And I've got a reference book that we've actually partially put together, and I do have a packing book on how to pack and ship for eBay, all broken down, that I'm probably going to actually register and get the ISBN and have it published as well. It'll be self-published probably on Amazon. I'm going to give links to that when it's out for those of you who are interested. But it would be helpful, I promise you, and not just because I did it and I'm trying to make money off you, but it is helpful, and a lot of people have used my packing ways and means, and have already responded, and I mean quite a few on the good feedback they've gotten since they've started packing the way that I showed. But there's other people who pack stuff just as good, if not better, in some aspects. But you take and you do it as you like. My way is cheapest, I would say, across the board, and is the safest for what you're paying for it. Again, I charge for shipping, but anyway. Just got a couple more here, and then I'll let it go with that. Now, this one's just on advertising postcards. Robert Reed. It's 2000. So again, as I said, a lot of these aren't modernized, but it doesn't really matter. You're only doing it for the content and identification and the overall aspect of it. Now, this is another Schiffer book. Now, I love the Schiffer books for images alone. So if you want something with good images, this is it. This is a good one. And this is all the advertising ones that I see, like the Firestone and Paramount and Ford Motor Company, things like that. These are what you're going to see, and like the chewing tobacco ones, which I have that one that's shown on the cover right there. So they're not worth a lot of money, just not every one in this. But this is a more specialized book. And then I think I just have one more book to show you. and this is holiday postcards. Now, this is by Robert Reed as well, too. Again, these are just specialized. Most of the other ones cover it. And, you know, the prices in here are so out of whack, they wouldn't mean much at all. You're better off on not buying the specialized ones for prices, or even for most things, you should just look online on eBay or on the postcard site, which, again, I'll give you out in a future video here. But if you want to see the images and you're not into or haven't been into postcards and you don't know the history, you don't know basically what to look for, this is a pretty good book, Vintage Postcards for the Holidays. But some of the other books have, you know, some of the same material in it. This is very extensive and covers only those aspects of it. So a novice person, this would be very good for you. And again, some of these you can just get from the library. Now, the paperback version of this you can get for like $5. So, you know, if you want to spend $5, $6, $8 on something, I would invest in a good identification book, if anything else. And don't do it if you're not making money. You know, wait till you've sold some of these items, and you can say you've turned a decent profit. You know, you bought a couple cards, or you got $20 in a postcards, and you finally now made, you know, and sold some postcards after a month or so of up, and you've probably doubled or tripled your money with all luck. You know, and then you want to go into it more. You see that, you know, you don't mind waiting on everything, because again, a lot of these are longer tail items, just as anything is nowadays. You know, I hear people say most of the stuff you sit on, and then I look at their clothing and they have 2,000 pieces or 3,000 pieces of clothing up, and they're selling, you know, maybe 2 a day if they're lucky, and those are ones that have been sitting for months. So, you know, it's the same basic principle. You know, you're looking at it from your clothing aspect, that, you know, you still sell clothing, and you'll list let's say you have 1,000 pieces of clothing up, and you want to branch off into postcards or vintage items, and you only have 100 up, and you only selling 1 a week or something, and you think you're frustrated. You got to realize you only got 100 of those up versus 1,000 of the clothing up. So which is going to sell much quicker is the clothing. You know, and especially when you're new and learning, you know. I started with nothing and no knowledge. I've got a good overall sense on this, though, luckily, because I've been exposed to antiques since I was like 7 or before. My grandparents' whole house was antiques, and I had an uncle who was an antique dealer, very large one at one time, too. He bought from everybody, you know, so anyway, but that's what I have on these books. And again, so I will have the links below. This should give you some very good ideas. These are honestly books that I've actually owned or still own right this very second. Every one of these. I just whittled out anything that I didn't actually own when I was looking through and trying to decide on which ones to show you. I went back to my bookshelf and decided I could have just sat here for an hour or more and shown you my personal books. I don't know what good that's going to do. These are the key ones that I would recommend. And basically just these key. And don't pick, you know, 2 or 3 of the same type. Like, don't buy 2 different postcard books or 3. Start with one and see where you go. And if it doesn't, or you learn the information there, or it's just not useful to you, sell it back on eBay. Most of these books will sell or will go up on FBA. They do sell fairly regularly. They usually have high customer feedback reviews and such forth on them as well, too. So anyway, that's what I have.
Well, there you go. Again, this is just some rough estimate on some of the books and some of the ones that I would recommend. Again, this one's key here, the antique postcards. For those of you just starting off, this will give you a real good primer in writing that you can take with you. You can read at lunch, you can read at work, if you're working a second job or doing eBay on the side. This is good, you know. So again, as I said, these are just the basics. There's a lot more out there on the market. There's, you know, as I said, there's ones for pottery markings. There's one for silver markings. Anyway, that's what I have for you today. Hope you liked the video. If you did, please hit the like button below. You can also hit the bell icon up top to be notified when I post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell a friend.